Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Hank's Movie Ranks. 2020 is a weird year. I'm pretty sure everyone who lived through it would know that. Obviously, the pandemic shutting everything down. But not only did it make it a very weird year in general, it is a weird year for movies. Now, obviously, you clicked on this video titled 2021 Best Picture nominees. Obviously, the Oscar ceremony is a couple months into the following year. So it's about the 2020 movies. But anyway, with that being said, like I said, very weird year for the world as a whole and for movies. And because of that, I think you get a very interesting lineup here where a lot of these movies, I think in other years where, more big budget films can come out, because a lot of the movies here are all pretty, smaller scale, I would say, for the most part. And in a different year, I think a lot of these movies might get kind of washed out or left behind and forgotten about and don't make it into a Best Picture lineup. So I think, obviously, with the year having been as weird as it was, it actually helps out a lot of these movies that make it in here have the opportunity to be recognized a lot more down the line and in the future. With all that being said, I think it's a kind of average lineup here, but with that being said, let's get my thoughts on these movies and just jump right in. Last place, I have Mank. Mank is the biopic directed by David Fincher, who is a great director. Show Social Network, Zodiac, great stuff. But it's his biopic, Netflix original film about Herman Mankiewicz, the man who co-wrote the script for Citizen Kane, of course, and I think it's a perfectly solid movie. The thing is, I don't think there's like a true complete dud in this lineup, but I think other than some of my ones at the top, I think it's just a lot of solid movies, and Mank kind of falls into that. Obviously, the performances are pretty strong. Gary Oldman's always pretty great in everything he does, and with it being weird in this black and white theme, all the technical aspects, cinematography look great, the production design's cool, and as I mentioned, with it being a Netflix original, Netflix obviously being one of the companies that can really put up the money at this time of COVID and kind of thrive with the streaming here, it ends up being one of the more higher budget films in this lineup, despite it just being kind of the average biopic. But yeah, like I said, it's not really a guy who I knew a whole ton about, and the first half of it or so, I thought it was kind of fine. It was interesting enough, but I wasn't really bought in, didn't really care too much. And then the second half, I think it starts to make you understand this character a little bit more, and it makes it a little more entertaining as it goes on. So obviously directing's great because it's David Fincher. A lot of the technical aspects are great, as I mentioned. Performances are strong. Overall, I just thought it was a little more dull of a story in the first half before picking up a little in this second. And it's a solid film, but for me, it would come in 8th place out of the 8 who were nominated that year. Moving on to number 7, I actually have the winner of Best Picture from this year. Definitely the lowest I've had a winner on any of my ranks so far, and that, of course, is Nomadland. Nomadland, that being said, I still think is a pretty strong film overall. Chloe Zhao is great as a director, aside from her Eternals MCU blunder, but in this movie she does a really good job. Frances McDormand is great, and I think one of the cool aspects of this is, aside from Frances McDormand and David Strathairn, most of the people in this are just themselves, are actual nomads who are acting in this and playing their role of kind of what they do on the normal basis. And I think it's a very interesting look into a lifestyle that doesn't get talked about a whole lot. And again, I think it's one of these ones where, does this win Best Picture in really any other year? Probably not. But I think it was really a good movie for its time that it came out. I still think it's a strong movie. As I said, it's very well acted, especially with most of these people in the movie not actually being official actors. And like I said, the story is very interesting. Overall, though, I feel like with it being just kind of a following around these people movie with no real, true, like, plot thread pushing it forward. At times, it was just a little like, oh, okay, nothing's really going on here for me. But overall, still strong movie, just not one of my favorites from this group here. Moving on to sixth place, I have Promising Young Woman. Promising Young Woman is, again, a very solid film. I think that, for me, Carey Mulligan is a great performance, and a lot of the stuff throughout the movie I really enjoy. This kind of revenge plot, and seeing how it talks about how Carey Mulligan's character, her best friend, had committed suicide from being sexually assaulted in the college years, and kind of Carey Mulligan's character getting revenge for all of this stuff. And that's an interesting plot, while still touching on an important topic, of course, and shining a light on how wrong that is. But to me, in the end, the ending isn't the greatest. I feel like it kind of just, I don't know, it doesn't really stick the landing of, like, bringing home its message of, like, looking at that horrible topic and really, like, condemning it in a way. It's kind of a weird ending that I feel like just doesn't really take much of a stance, and it's more, like, cartoony in a way than it really should be on this serious subject. So overall, I think it was a strong movie, but the ending for it kind of brings it down a bit for me. I did also like Bo Burnham's character in this a lot, where it seems like this really nice guy, and then as it goes along, you find out in the end, like, oh, even this guy who seemed really nice has a lot of issues and has been really bad at times. So again, I think really interesting stuff going on here, but again, the ending for me bumps it down a bit. So for the other movies in this list, I just couldn't put it above. Moving on to number 5, I have Judas and the Black Messiah. This is another one about a very important topic. I knew of Fred Hampton, but I didn't know a whole lot about, like, I knew of who he was, but I didn't know a whole lot about his story. So I thought this was a really interesting look at that, and I'm realizing how important of a figure he was, and then how kind of dirty they did him, in how he ends up being killed in the end. So I thought it was just a very interesting story and look at this real-life human, and a story, again, I didn't know a whole ton about. I think it's got a lot of very important things to say. The acting in this is all stellar. The only weird thing is I don't know why Lakeith Stanfield and Daniel Kaluuya were both nominated supporting actress that year, when more than anything they might both be leads, but that's besides the point. But yeah, they're both great here. So is everyone else supporting them around. And yeah, overall, I just think it was a very strong movie. As I mentioned, touches on very important topics, and this one does the thing of looking at its important topic and discussing it in a much more meaningful manner and bringing it home in a more effective way, I think, than something like Promising Young Woman did, for example. So that's why, for me, I have it right above it. At number 4, I'm going with The Trial of the Chicago 7. This one tells, shocker, about the trial of the Chicago 7 from the riots that happened in Chicago back in, well, I should have checked on that before I started filming, but I believe the late 60s. That might be completely wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. Anyway, realistically, the only reason this one's this high up for me is I do like the ensemble cast here. I think everyone's giving pretty strong performances. Although I don't think there's any one real, like, true standout next level performance in here. But for me, it's just the fact that I'm a big fan of a courtroom movie. This is exactly what that is. And also, I'm a big fan of the Aaron Sorkin screenplays, whether that's, or mostly in Social Network, but a lot of his other stuff that he does as well. And he's the director of this movie and the screenwriter of this movie. So you take courtroom movies, I'm a big fan of Aaron Sorkin writing. I'm a big fan of, voila, this one works for me a lot. And And while maybe some of the actual true technical aspects of it is lower quality than some of the ones I have below it here, just those elements of it are going to push it up for me personally, compared to some of these other ones. So I have it at number 4. Moving on to third place, I have Minari. Minari is just kind of a subtle look at a Korean family moving to rural Arkansas and how they have to kind of adapt to this lifestyle. But also, I think it shows an interesting story of they actually are kind of embraced and taken in by their community. And it really is just the kind of a slice of life movie, but I think it does a very good job of taking all these different members of the family who are at different stages of their life and showing, how this change affects all these different people. The parents of this, I think they show a really great example of people who are trying to, work through things with their family and provide for them while having some rough situations and a lot of change in their lives. The kids, that you still see kind of the joy and whimsy that comes from a new move to a place and just being a child and seeing some of the fun things there. And then also the grandmother who moves in, showing aging and how when you're an older person, change like that can be very disorienting and jarring for you. So I think it shows very distinct and interesting looks at all different stages of life and how they relate to this given topic and this given situation. So overall, for me, I thought this one was just a really touching one, very emotional. Alan Kim, who plays the young child in this, that kid deserves the world. He's awesome. One of the best young actors I've seen. So shout out to him. And overall, yeah, just a very emotional, heartwarming movie. So I have it at number 3. Moving on to the top 2, I'm going to go with Sound of Metal in second place. Sound of Metal has, I think, the best sound design I've seen in a movie, maybe ever. The way because it's about a drummer in a band who starts to go deaf and the struggles he obviously faces with that, being a musician, and the sound it uses showing that is incredible. How it shows the muted sounds or the staticky sounds and how it kind of fades in and out at times is just very, very interesting stuff. And the way it can quickly change from, if he puts a hearing aid on it, it's like giving the sound, to when it takes it off, just going silent, and showing that having the dramatic effect is fantastic here. Another touch I really enjoyed about this was as he starts to be around people who are using sign language and whatnot, they don't give you subtitles for what the other people are signing in the movie. And at first I was kind of like, oh, do I have something wrong with my subtitles? But then as he starts to learn sign language, then you start getting the subtitles. And I think that's just a really great touch. And another interesting aspect of this movie, Riz Ahmed has a great performance here. I don't really have a whole lot more to say. Those technical aspects in it are fantastic. The performances are very strong. I think it's just a very interesting look at, again, another topic where it's kind of a theme of this year where, you don't have these big spectacle films or anything. They're on these more isolated topics and interesting situations, this time being looking at somebody who's going deaf and how they cope and struggle with that, especially when they're a musician. So very touching one again, very emotional moments as well. And overall, some of the coolest sound design and technical aspects I've seen in movies. So I really, really enjoyed Sound of Metal. But finally, at number 1, I'm going to go with The Father. The Father was a roller coaster ride. This movie is fantastic. Anthony Hopkins gives, in terms of these 8 movies, by far the best performance out of any of them, I think. And one of the best ones I've seen, period. He's fantastic in this movie, absolutely killing it. And again, as I mentioned before, with a lot of these movies, showing a deep, in-depth look at someone going through a given situation. In this case, him getting old and suffering from dementia and how his daughter has to cope with that. But also, this is one of the most disorienting movies you will ever watch. There are moments where things loop back around or different plot threads go a spot, and you're like, wait, what? How did that get here? How did that happen in this way? What is going on? And I think it's a perfect example of showing, obviously, I don't struggle with dementia, but how I can just, it makes me feel like when I'm watching this movie, in a way, I am like fully experiencing what it's like to have that, because the filmmaking here is so strong in depicting that and making that seem just crazy and like what is going on and how it just messes with your mind. So I think, again, when it's a year of looking at all these different, more isolated topics and diseases and struggles and controversial situations and stuff, I think that this one is the best one with the best performance and just a very, very amazing screenplay as well. Everything really came together for me with this one, and despite the fact that I felt so disoriented watching it at times, it was in the best way possible. So for this one, I really, really enjoyed it, and for me, it was easily the #1 pick from this year's lineup. Again, a very interesting year, as I talked about multiple times when talking about these films. Not these big spectacle movies, not these kind of grander stories, more isolated looks at given events, given diseases and given living situations and whatnot, as I mentioned. And I thought it was kind of an interesting year to go through because of that. Looking at all these more smaller scale indie films that in a lot of other years I think get overlooked, and it was a very fun list to make because of that. And yeah, because, well, as that's my ranking for those ones. Now that I've done all of the 5 lineups from movies that came out in the 2020s, be on the lookout for a couple videos doing more cumulative rankings with all of them coming up after this. And then also I'll continue moving on with the ranking videos, moving on to what I think is probably my favorite Best Picture lineup I've ever seen, the 2020 Oscars with the 2019 films, one of the best years in film from when I've been alive, in my opinion. So be on the lookout for those. As always, if you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing, because you'll get a lot more ranking videos like this along the way. And as always, thank you all for watching. See you in the next one.